Welcome to the Uncanny Valley podcast, where we take your source material and unpack the most fascinating insights, unexpected connections, and crucial takeaways, cutting through the noise so you can be truly well-informed.
Today we're embarking on a journey into a monumental literary classic, Charles Dickens' Great Expectations.
Yeah.
We've curated an intriguing selection of its early chapters, and we're interweaving them with glimpses into later, pivotal revelations.
Yeah.
Our mission really is to navigate this rich, intricate landscape of human nature and societal influence through the eyes of a young boy named Pip. We want to extract those surprising facts and, those profound emotional beats that make this story so enduringly resonant.
That's right. What we have before us is a unique mosaic of excerpts. They span from Pip's earliest, most terrifying memories right through to moments of profound revelation and even unexpected comfort. Our goal for this exploration isn't just to recount the story, but to really delve into surprising truths, the deep emotional currents, and the piercing societal observations that continue to make Great Expectations feel so, well, remarkably relevant, even today.
Precisely. As we move through Pip's world, we'll uncover these universal themes.
Yeah.
The crippling grip of fear, the powerful pull of aspiration, the often unseen impact of secret benefactors, and the complex, sometimes painful web of relationships that relentlessly shape a person's identity and destiny. Prepare yourself, because this story is truly packed with moments that will make you rethink assumptions and, connect dots you never knew were there.
Yeah.
The bleak beginnings, Pip's childhood on the marshes.
Okay, let's unpack this right from the very start. Our story begins not with a grand statement, but with this vivid, almost raw image. A small bundle of shivers, a child who calls himself Pip. The opening lines of this classic immediately plunge us into his world, or rather, his incredibly limited perception of it. What specifically does Dickens do in those first few sentences to establish not just his physical environment, but his profound sense of isolation and even his nascent self-perception? He's so young, yet already sort of burdened by his surroundings.
It's a masterful stroke of character introduction, really.
Yeah.
Dickens immediately establishes Pip's entire existence through the lens of a child's understanding. We learned his full name is Philip Pirrip, but his infant tongue could make of both names nothing longer or more explicit than Pip.
Right.
Think about that for a moment. He literally named himself. This isn't a name bestowed by loving parents. It's a self-assertion born of necessity and, well, limited language. It underscores an almost primal self-awareness, a foundational identity formed in a vacuum. This immediately tells us about a profound absence. We're explicitly told his parents are deceased, known to him only from their cold and personal tombstone. Philip Pirrip, late of this parish, and also Georgiana, wife of the above. He has no memory, no likeness, no familial connection to them beyond that stark inscription in the damp, lonely churchyard.
Just the words.
Exactly. This profound lack of parental presence means his earliest grasp of family, of origin, is tied to death and finality. His entire nascent world is constrained to this small, desolate churchyard, the distant winding river, and the vast, formidable, often foreboding sea. This geographical isolation, coupled with the emotional isolation of never having known his father or mother, creates a palpable sense of profound loneliness and a very limited, fear-tinged worldview right from the outset. That phrase, a small bundle of shivers, as he describes himself, truly encapsulates the utter vulnerability and isolation that define his earliest years. He's navigating a world where even his own name is a truncated version of something he can barely comprehend, reflecting his truncated sense of family and belonging in a harsh, unyielding landscape.
And it doesn't take long for that already limited, fearful world to expand in the most terrifying and abrupt way. Here's why it gets truly unsettling. Imagine being a small child, vulnerable and alone among gravestones, when suddenly a fearful man emerges from the bleakness. This initial meeting isn't just an introduction to a character, it's a foundational trauma that sets the stage for so much of Pip's future. How does this immediate visceral fear from such an imposing, desperate figure shape Pip's understanding of the world, especially when you contrast it with the supposed safety of his home life?
This encounter is, without exaggeration, absolutely pivotal. It's a moment of raw, unmediated terror that indelibly marks Pip. The man is described with stark, chilling precision. All in coarse gray, with a great iron on his leg. No hat, broken shoes, and an old rag tied around his head.
Just terrifying imagery.
Absolutely. He's a figure of utter destitution, certainly, but also profound menace. He threatens Pip with those chilling words, "Hold your noise, keep still, you little devil, or I'll cut your throat."
Hey.
He doesn't just ask, he demands that file and them wittles food brought to him tomorrow morning early at that old battery over yonder.
In the threat.
Oh, the threat is almost too gruesome for a child. Pip's heart and liver shall be tore out if he fails or dares to speak of it. Pip's reaction is exactly what we'd expect from such a young, sensitive boy. He's a small bundle of shivers, growing afraid of it all and beginning to cry.
Understand.
His faltering, "Good night, sir," is this desperate plea for safety, a tiny attempt to impose civility on an utterly uncivilized situation. And the haunting image he retains, seeing the convict eluding the hands of the dead people, it just blurs the lines between the living and the spectral, making the experience even more nightmarish in his young mind.
Yeah, that's deeply creepy.
This immediate life or death threat from a complete stranger establishes a raw power imbalance that Pip has never known. It's a brutal introduction to the harshness and potential danger lurking in the world beyond his meager, predictable home. This visceral fear, experienced at such a tender age, instills a deep-seated apprehension in Pip that will linger and subtly influence his decisions throughout his life. It forces him almost immediately to internalize secrets and navigate moral quandaries far beyond his years, shaping his developing conscience in a profound way that, well, many adults struggle with. What's also fascinating is that fleeting glimpse of the convict's own desperation. "I wish I was a frog or an eel," and the way he hugs his shuddering body. This momentary flash of broken humanity beneath the menace adds a layer of complexity to Pip's terror that he certainly can't process then, but which, the reader can discern.
So from the terrifying mist-shrouded marshes, Pip returns to a home that, while providing shelter and a roof over his head, offers little true respite. It's a different kind of terror, isn't it? One of constant domestic tension and, well, emotional neglect. Let's delve into this household. Can you describe Mrs. Joe and Joe Gargery, their individual characters, and the complex dynamics within that home?
Indeed, the home environment provides a psychological counterpoint to the external terror, but it's certainly not a safe haven in the traditional sense. Joe's forge adjoins their wooden house, and Pip finds a measure of solace in Joe's quiet company because, as he describes it, they are fellow sufferers.
Right, they're in it together in a way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mrs. Joe, Pip's older sister and guardian, is often on the rampage. Her primary instrument of further investigation, as she calls it, is Tickler, a formidable cane she wields with punitive efficiency. She's prone to fits of temper, even throwing Pip as a connubial missile at Joe, highlighting the chaotic and volatile atmosphere.
Wow, that's quite an image.
It is. Her constant refrain, "Who brought you it by hand?" meaning she raised him with great difficulty, and her bemoaning her lot, "It's bad enough to be a blacksmith's wife, and him a Gargery, without being your mother," revealed this deep resentment, a self-sacrificing victim mentality, and a relentless tendency to inflict her own misery upon those around her. It's emotional abuse, really, even if subtly framed. Pip, in turn, treats Joe as a larger species of child and is no more than my equal. This is a young boy's perception of his adult brother-in-law, showing Joe's gentle, almost childlike nature.
That says a lot about Joe.
It does. Joe's attempts to communicate with Pip about Mrs. Joe, using nonverbal cues like sulks or pronouncing Buster, a euphemism for Mrs. Joe's anger, with at least 12 capital B's, further underscore his timid, non-confrontational nature and his deep-seated fear of his wife's volatile temper. This dynamic is absolutely critical to Pip's early development. Joe's kindness, his profound loyalty, and his quiet, enduring goodness, despite his own suffering under Mrs. Joe, provide the only true warmth and affection Pip knows. It's a quiet, unconditional love that contrasts sharply with the explicit threats of the convict and the constant fret and fright and worry at home.
So Joe's really his anchor.
He is. This early environment, while harsh and emotionally taxing, paradoxically teaches Pip about enduring love and loyalty, even as he yearns, quite understandably, to escape its confines. It lays the groundwork for Pip's complicated relationship with his origins and the people who truly care for him. 2. The theft and its aftermath. A child's burdened conscience.
So Pip finds himself trapped, almost literally, between the terrifying external threat of the convict and the constant, simmering anxiety at home. His conscience, even at this incredibly young age, becomes a remarkably heavy burden, especially when combined with the weight of a half-stolen slice of bread and butter. How does Dickens portray the psychological weight of this secret, this nascent guilt, and what does it reveal about Pip's developing moral compass in such a pressure cooker environment?
The psychological impact here is strikingly immediate and deeply empathetic. Pip's fear is so pervasive that he literally struggles to eat, constantly aware of the bread and butter hidden uncomfortably in his trouser's leg.
Oh yeah, that detail.
Right. This hidden item immediately makes him think of the man with the load on his leg, a direct, almost visceral connection to the convict's physical burden. It reveals an early profound empathy and shared suffering, even for his tormentor.
Even though he's terrified of him.
Exactly. He poignantly calls conscience a dreadful thing when it accuses him, a child's simple yet powerful declaration of internal torment. On Christmas Eve, a day traditionally associated with joy and celebration, Pip is tasked with stirring the Christmas pudding with a copper stick, a domestic chore that becomes federally unmanageable due to the hidden bread and butter in his ankle area. This small, seemingly insignificant detail is Dickens at his best, turning a common object into a symbol of overwhelming guilt. He eventually has to slip away to hide the stolen food in his garret bedroom, a small, desperate act of rebellion against the constant scrutiny, and an immense source of shame and guilt.
This simple stolen item becomes a physical manifestation of his moral burden, doesn't it?
Right.
A secret weight that presses down on him.
Absolutely. That very night, the harsh realities of the outside world penetrate his fragile peace. Pip hears the sound of great guns, which Joe, in his simple way, explains means another convict off. Mrs. Joe snappishly clarifies, escaped. Escaped, adding the brutal, blunt reality of the legal system and the danger these men represent.
In the hulks.
Yes, Pip later learns the firing is from the hulks, the notorious prison ships, grim symbols of Victorian justice. He imagines himself drifting to these hulks in a nightmare, haunted by a ghostly pirate calling him to be hanged, consumed by the consequences of his actions and the looming threat of the law's inescapable reach. He's afraid to sleep, utterly consumed by fear and guilt.
Just crippling fear for a child.
It really is. This section brilliantly illustrates how external threats and the moral ambiguities he faces converge to create an unbearable weight of fear and guilt for a child. The load on Pip's leg, mirroring the iron on the convict's, subtly but powerfully foreshadows the deep, unspoken, and often disturbing connection that will ultimately bind their destinies.
And as if that wasn't enough psychological burden, Pip's forced obedience to the convict's demand leads him back into the mist, only to discover another layer of complication, another fearful encounter. This isn't just about the first convict anymore. It introduces a new, unsettling element, creating a far more intricate web of circumstances. What does the introduction of a second convict and the subsequent confrontation reveal about the interconnectedness of these characters? And how does it deepen Pip's moral dilemma, making his choice even more fraught?
This scene truly complicates Pip's initial, relatively straightforward understanding of his predicament. He sets off at first faint dawn on a rimy morning, a stark, cold landscape perfectly reflecting his internal state of apprehension and, well, forced duty.
Right.
He encounters the second convict, a figure described of Dickensian vividness, suspiciously looking as if he thought there was danger in every direction if somebody's coming to take the pie away, and very like the dog in his voracious, almost animalistic eating habits, a detail that both humanizes his desperate hunger and dehumanizes his behavior simultaneously.
That's a disturbing comparison.
It is. Pip, in his innocent but terrified state, timidly asks if he should leave any of it for him, referring to the young man that you spoke of, that was hid with you. This seemingly innocuous question immediately implies a shared past or circumstance between the two convicts, a detail that instantly expands the scope of Pip's coerced involvement from a singular, isolated act to something far more extensive and dangerous.
So he thinks they're together.
He assumes so. The second convict, taken aback, denies knowing any young man and stares at Pip with the keenest scrutiny and the greatest surprise, intensifying Pip's fear. Pip, trembling, tries desperately to explain, describing the man who first threatened him. Just like you, only with a hat and with the same reason for wanting to borrow a file. He even asks plaintively, "Didn't you hear the cannon last night?"
He's trying to make sense of.
He is, but this frantic attempt to clarify only seems to further enrage the second convict, who grabs him by the collar, making Pip fear his first idea of cutting my throat had revived. And crucially, the text notes the detail of the second convict's badly bruised face and the old chafe on his own leg, hinting at a recent violent struggle that will soon be revealed. This interaction forces Pip to grapple with a more complex and morally ambiguous reality. The world isn't just about his single, terrifying secret with one fugitive, but a tangled web of interconnected criminals, deepening his moral dilemma and the very real danger he's unwittingly stepped into.
It suggests that nothing in this world is simple, right? And every action has unforeseen, far-reaching consequences. And as if on cue, the tension truly builds to a crescendo as soldiers arrive, bringing the raw drama of the marshes directly into Pip's home, interrupting the supposedly peaceful Christmas Day feast. This public spectacle of justice, of the law closing in, plays out before Pip's very eyes. How does this traumatic encounter and the incredibly specific dynamic between the two convicts begin to hint at deeper, more complex narratives that transcend simple notions of good versus evil or, hero versus villain?
The arrival of the soldiers on Christmas Day is a moment of profound irony, isn't it? It violently disrupts the assumed peace and joviality of the holiday with the harsh, undeniable realities of the law and its relentless pursuit. A party of soldiers, led by a sergeant, arrives at Joe's forge, not for celebration, but for practical assistance. They need help mending handcuffs.
Right into the middle of Christmas dinner.
Precisely. They openly state their grim mission. They are hunting two convicts. The sergeant's precise questions about the time and the distance from the marshes, we begin to close in upon them about dusk, reveal their strategic, methodical, almost inevitable hunt. Pip is utterly terrified, paralyzed by a secret he cannot reveal. Everybody, myself excepted, said no, with confidence. Nobody thought of me.
Oh, that line is chilling.
It is. He is acutely aware that his particular convict might believe he had brought the soldiers there, a heavy burden of guilt and fear for a child to bear. Out on the marshes, the chase culminates dramatically. They hear two or more shouts and find Pip's convict and the other, the gentleman convict, in a desperate, struggling fight.
So they find them fighting each other.
Yes, and here's where the narrative complexity truly deepens. Pip's convict, with blood on his face from the struggle, declares with fierce, almost perverse pride, "I took him. I give him up to you. Mind that." He reveals he dragged him here and pointedly calls the other a gentleman, not as a compliment, but as a sneering indictment.
A gentleman.
Yes, suggesting a stark class distinction even among criminals and a deep-seated, bitter animosity driving his actions. This isn't just about escape from the law. It's about vengeance, about a twisted sense of justice and rivalry between these two men.
Wow.
Amidst this raw display of violence and capture, Joe's compassionate reaction stands out as a beacon of pure, unconditional human kindness. When Pip's convict humbly says, "I've eat your pie," acknowledging his theft, Joe replies with profound, simple grace, "God knows you're welcome to it."
That moment always gets me. Joe's just...
He is fundamentally good. This moment highlights Joe's capacity for empathy, even towards a desperate criminal. The symbolic image of the prison ship, the hulks, described as ironed like the prisoners, reinforces the pervasive, inescapable nature of the legal system and how its cold, hard reality ensnares even the landscape itself. This entire encounter pushes Pip, and us, to question simple notions of good and evil, revealing a world where survival, revenge, deep-seated class resentments, and unexpected compassion intertwine in ways a child could never fully comprehend, but could certainly feel the weight of. 3. Pip's aspirations in the world of Satis House.
After those dramatic, terrifying events on the marshes, Pip settles back into life at the forge. Yet, it's abundantly clear that he's not the same boy. Internally, profound changes are stirred within him, an awakening of desires and dissatisfactions. We begin to see his world expand beyond the physical confines of the marshes to the intricate internal landscape of his burgeoning aspirations. How do Joe and Biddy, through their contrasting qualities, represent an anchor for Pip, a connection to a more authentic life, even as he yearns for something far beyond what they can offer?
This section is crucial because it truly reveals Pip's nascent self-consciousness and his developing desires. Desires that subtly begin to pull him away from his immediate, humble circumstances. Pip undertakes the earnest, yet ultimately conflicted task of trying to teach Joe to read and write.
Which seems like a good thing.
On the surface, yes. This act is born partly of genuine affection for Joe, but also, quite tellingly, of a burgeoning desire to make Joe less ignorant and common, that he might be worthier of my society and less open to Estella's reproach.
Oof, that's harsh, even if he doesn't fully realize it.
It's a truly heartbreaking internal conflict, isn't it? His affection for Joe is now tainted by a desire to improve him for his own perceived social gain. Joe, ever humble and philosophical, embodies profound acceptance of his lot, believing deeply that somebody must keep the pot a boiling. A simple yet profound statement of duty and continuity.
He's content?
He is. His unwavering loyalty to Mrs. Joe, even calling her a fine figure of a woman. despite her temper, and admitting she comes the mogul over us, highlights his deep, unconditional affection and simplicity. He is a bedrock of unassuming goodness. Then we have Biddy, a bright, observant girl from Mr. Wopsle's great-aunt's rather chaotic village school. She quickly becomes Pip's true confidant and, more effectively than Pip, his teacher. She manages their domestic life wonderfully with a practical competence that Mrs. Joe lacks.
She sounds like a much better influence.
In many ways, yes. Pip later confides in her with increasing frequency, seeing her as having a deep concern in everything I told her. Biddy represents clear-sightedness, quiet intelligence, and a deep, empathetic understanding. Despite Pip's growing shame about his common status, wishing his hands weren't so coarse or his boots thick, Joe and Biddy, through their contrasting yet complementary qualities, represent authentic love, steadfastness, and an unwavering moral compass.
They're the real deal.
They are.
Oh.
They're an emotional anchor, a pure good influence, offering groundedness and genuine connection, even as Pip's increasingly grand aspirations threaten to pull him away, setting the stage for his future regrets regarding his treatment of them. They highlight the paradox of his quest. The greatness he seeks outside is already present, in a different form, right here at home.
And now, for what might be the most iconic and truly uncanny environment in all of English literature. Miss Havisham's house. Satis house. It's not just strange, it's a living monument to a moment frozen in time, steeped in decay and bitterness, clearly designed to inflict pain. Pip's repeated encounters with Miss Havisham and her adopted daughter Estella are utterly formative, fundamentally reshaping his desires and perceptions. How does Estella become the instrument of Miss Havisham's elaborate, cruel revenge? And what does Pip's immediate, almost inexplicable attraction to Estella, despite her deliberate cruelty, tell us about his nascent desires and vulnerabilities, particularly his yearning for social elevation?
Satis House is truly a Gothic masterpiece of psychological decay and arrested development. The very name, Satis, meaning enough, is bitterly ironic, as nothing within its walls is enough for Miss Havisham's insatiable bitterness.
Right, enough house. Nothing is ever enough for her.
Exactly. Pip is invited to play there through his overbearing and rather self-important Unc Cumblechuk, a local corn chandler who often takes undue credit for Pip's rising fortunes. The description of the house immediately sets a chilling, stagnant tone. Dismal trees, dismal sparrows, and the most dismal cats, and even dismal houses nearby. It's just pervasive gloom.
Everywhere you look.
Inside, the clocks are all stopped at 20 minutes to 9, the precise moment of Miss Havisham's abandonment at the altar by her fraudulent fiancé, Compasson. She is a spectral figure, eternally trapped in that moment, dressed in a once-white dress, all yellow and withered, existing in a state of arrested decay where everything around in a state to crumble under a touch.
Like time literally stopped.
It did, for her. She sits by a rotting bride cake, a grotesque centerpiece to her bitterness, wishing for her ruin to be complete and for them to lay me dead in my bride's dress on the bride's table, which shall be done, and which will be the finished curse upon him. This is a house steeped not just in bitterness, but in a desire for profound, self-destructive vengeance.
Chilling. And then there's Estella.
And into this decaying tableau steps Estella, Miss Havisham's adopted daughter, who is literally bred to be the exquisite instrument of this vengeance. Her first impression on Pip is devastatingly significant. She is proud, disdainful, and immediately cuts him down, telling him he is a stupid, clumsy, laboring boy, and that his hands are coarse and his boots thick.
Just brutal.
Brutal and calculated.
Yeah.
She even observes, cruelly, "You have been crying till you were half blind," highlighting his vulnerability. Miss Havisham actively encourages this cruelty, whispering to Estella, "Break their hearts, my pride and hope. Break their hearts and have no mercy." This is psychological warfare, with Estella as the weapon.
Yet he falls for her anyway.
Yes, despite this constant scorn, Pip becomes utterly infatuated with Estella. This attraction, despite her cruelty, is tragically telling. It reveals his deep-seated desire for social elevation, for acceptance by a world he perceives as refined and beautiful. It's a yearning so strong that he is drawn, moth-like, to the very person who highlights and despises his common origins. Her beauty and disdain become inextricably linked to his aspiration, driving his longing to transcend his past and become something more, to become a gentleman worthy of her. It's a psychological trap, as you said, where her cruelty paradoxically fuels his ambition, ensuring Miss Havisham's revenge continues through Pip's own relentless and often misguided pursuit of self-improvement and social status.
So twisted.
It really is. This is further cemented when Pip even fights and wins against a pale young gentleman, later revealed as Herbert Pocket, a key figure in his London life, who Estella has also mocked. Estella's reward for Pip's triumph is a kiss on his cheek, which feels to him given to the coarse common boy as a piece of money might have been, emphasizing its transactional, unfeeling nature and further cementing his desperate desire to be worthy of more. 4. The promise of a new life. Pip's great expectations.
So Pip's life takes a formal turn with his apprenticeship to Joe. For many, this would seem like a secure, respectable, even a comfortable path in Victorian society. But for Pip, his heart is clearly elsewhere. The forge, once a familiar comfort, a place of warmth, and Joe's steadfast presence becomes a symbol of what he desperately wishes to escape. How does this formal binding, this seemingly solid foundation, instead highlight the destructive nature of social aspiration and the subtle, insidious ways it can corrupt even the purest, most genuine affection?
The apprenticeship, which should have been a source of stability, pride, and continuity, instead becomes a crucible for Pip's growing dissatisfaction and internal conflict. Miss Havisham, with her peculiar benevolence, gives a premium of 25 guineas for Pip to be formally bound to Joe.
A significant sum.
Indeed. Yet, in that very exchange, Joe, overwhelmed and deeply uncomfortable with the formality, still addresses Pip, not Miss Havisham. This highlights Joe's humble, unpretentious nature and perhaps his discomfort with the transactional aspect of what should have been a simple natural progression for Pip. Pip, however, can only feel ashamed of the dear good fellow, a truly heartbreaking admission given Joe's unwavering, unconditional love. This is a pivotal moment in Pip's internal shift.
That shame is so powerful.
It is. The reality of the forge sharply contrasts with Pip's earlier fantasies fueled by his encounters at Satis house. When I should at last roll up my shirt sleeves and go into the forge, Joe's prentice, I should be distinguished and happy. Now the reality was in my hold, I only felt that I was dusty with the dust of small coal.
That image. The dust of small coal.
It's so poignant, isn't it? It isn't just literal. It symbolizes the mundane, unglamorous, perhaps even suffocating reality that crushes his grander dreams. It speaks to the weight of the common life he now feels trapped in, a burden on his daily remembrance. It's also deeply significant that despite his internal turmoil and growing disdain, he never murmurs to Joe during this period, recognizing this restraint as about the only thing I'm glad to know of myself in that connection.
A small mercy, perhaps?
Perhaps. This silent suffering underscores his profound internal conflict and the growing emotional distance from Joe, a chasm that Pip is actively creating. While he continues to try and impart knowledge to Joe, he reluctantly admits it's ultimately to make Joe less ignorant and common, betraying a subtle yet deeply patronizing attitude born of his evolving aspirations, rather than pure, selfless generosity.
He thinks he's helping, but it's really about his own embarrassment.
Exactly. This apprenticeship, instead of solidifying his place and identity, serves to emphasize his longing for a life far beyond the forge. A life that Miss Havisham and Estella have, intentionally or not, seeded and cultivated in his impressionable young mind. It shows how the pursuit of an idealized social status can subtly erode the very foundations of genuine affection and self-worth.
And then the world turns upside down again, with the arrival of a figure who will fundamentally, irrevocably alter Pip's trajectory, seemingly out of nowhere or perhaps from the shadows of his past. This isn't just a change in circumstance, it's a dramatic pivot that introduces a whole new, profound layer of moral complexity and suspense. Describe the initial revelation of Pip's great expectations and the curious, almost unsettling conditions attached to this sudden change in fortune.
This moment is, without question, the defining pivot of the entire story, transforming Pip's entire future in an instant. A secret-looking man named Mr. Jaggers appears at the Jolly Bargeman, a shadowy, precise figure. He presents Joe with a file.
A file.
Yes, a file, which Pip immediately recognizes as Joe's file. A chillingly precise link that instantly connects this stranger back to the very first terrifying encounter on the marshes, to the convict.
Oh my goodness, right there.
Right there. It's a deeply unsettling detail, a subtle, almost subliminal foreshadowing that the true source of Pip's coming fortune is far from the genteel, aristocratic world he's fantasized about. Jaggers, a formidable and rather menacing lawyer, then informs Pip with detached efficiency that he has great expectations from a secret benefactor. The conditions attached are precise, almost draconian. Pip was to be brought up as a gentleman and be educated for no other purpose. Crucially, he must keep the benefactor's identity a profound secret. Jaggers lays it out starkly. If you have suspicion in your own breast, keep that suspicion in your own breast.
So it's not just free money. There are serious strings attached.
Absolutely. This isn't a gift given freely. It's a fortune burdened by secrecy and an unspoken, perhaps sinister obligation. Joe's reaction here is profoundly illuminating and highlights his unwavering integrity. His humility and inherent goodness shine through as he steadfastly refuses any money for the loss of the little child who had come to the forge and ever the best of friends.
He doesn't want to be paid for losing Pip.
Exactly. His love for Pip is unconditional, untainted by avarice. He later insists, with heartbreaking foresight, that he and Pip are not two figures to be together in London, recognizing the immense social chasm that this sudden wealth will inevitably open between them.
He sees it coming.
He does. The abrupt shift in Pip's fortunes, while seemingly miraculous and the answer to his deepest desires, is immediately tainted by secrecy, the unsettling nature of Jaggers, and the painful severance of his genuine humble connections. It introduces a deep, gnawing sense of unease, as the true source of his great expectations is shrouded in mystery and comes with conditions that hint at a darker, far more ambiguous purpose than simple benevolence. Pip's dream comes true, but at a hidden cost that he has yet to truly understand. V-Life in London and the unraveling of truth.
Pip arrives in London, a place he's imagined as grand, sophisticated, and ultimately liberating, the very embodiment of his new expectations. But the city quickly reveals itself as a place of stark realities and unexpected disillusionment, a far cry from his idyllic dreams. He meets some truly memorable characters there, each offering a different facet of London life and revealing more about the complex social structures of the time. Tell us about Pip's initial disillusionment with the city and the fascinating, sometimes absurd people he encounters as he steps into his new identity.
London, for Pip, is initially a place of stark and immediate disillusionment, a brutal contrast to his idealized, almost romanticized expectations. His lodging at Barnard's Inn, which he likely imagined as grand or at least respectable, is described with cutting honesty as the dingiest collection of shabby buildings resembling a flat burying ground with dismal trees, sparrows, and the most dismal cats.
Not exactly the glamorous life you picture.
Not at all. This grim reality of urban decay and neglect immediately clashes with the great expectations he holds for his new life. It's a very Dickensian touch, where the environment mirrors the internal state. It's here, in this rather shabby setting, that he remarkably reunites with Herbert Pocket, the pale young gentleman he famously fought at Satis House.
Oh, right. The fight.
Yes. Herbert is now inky from his books, a struggling clerk with an optimistic, if somewhat naive, outlook. Herbert, surprisingly, reveals he was also on the lookout for good fortune from Miss Havisham, who simply couldn't take a fancy to me, a detail that humanizes their shared, peculiar past and Miss Havisham's arbitrary nature.
So he didn't get the golden ticket.
He didn't. Despite his own precarious financial situation, Herbert immediately becomes Pip's loyal friend and offers earnest, often amusing, advice on becoming a gentleman, even down to specific etiquette like the attitude of opening oysters, a perfect example of the superficialities of gentility.
Learning the ropes.
Exactly. Pip then encounters the broader Pocket family, a brilliantly satirical portrayal of upper-middle-class domestic chaos. There's Mr. Matthew Pocket, Herbert's father, a delightful academic who lectures on domestic economy but is ironically chaotic at home, once putting boiled fowl into my bed in a fit of absent-mindedness.
Ah, seriously.
Seriously. Mrs. Pocket, meanwhile, is absurdly obsessed with her lineage, perpetually mentioning her grandpapa's granddaughter and noble connections, a pointed commentary on superficial social aspirations and the ridiculousness of inherited status without substance. These characters and their various eccentricities immediately introduce Pip to the complex and often contradictory social structures of London, where appearances often belie reality.
Beyond the Pockets, Pip's London life becomes increasingly dominated by Mr. Jaggers, his formidable lawyer, and Jaggers' utterly eccentric clerk, Wemmick. These characters embody completely different, almost opposing, ways of navigating the city's social structures, highlighting the crucial theme of appearance versus reality. How do their dual lives and their distinct environments reflect the various coping mechanisms people adopt in this guarded and suspicious world? And what do they teach Pip about the true nature of London society?
Mr. Jaggers' office is a formidable, almost oppressive place, designed to intimidate and impress, with its shining black portraits on the walls, giving it an official, unornamented look, much like the man himself. Jaggers is the embodiment of legal precision and cold, calculating efficiency.
A man you wouldn't want to cross.
Definitely not. He's a man who deals with the underbelly of society, but remains untouched by its grime, constantly washing his hands as if cleansing himself of the moral dirt of his clients. His housekeeper, Molly, is another fascinating, unsettling detail. She has remarkable strength in her wrists, a detail Jaggers likes to show off to his guests, almost like a parlor trick, hinting at a hidden, violent past that he expertly keeps contained.
That's unnerving.
It is. This cold, precise professional sphere of Jaggers is then contrasted sharply by Wemmick, Jaggers' clerk. Wemmick embodies the theme of appearance versus reality with a delightful, almost theatrical clarity through his portable property philosophy, rigorously separating his professional life from his personal one.
The Walworth Wemmick versus the office Wemmick.
Exactly. His catchphrase, uttered with knowing wisdom, "Walworth is one place, and this office is another," encapsulates his dual persona. At Walworth, Wemmick lives in a whimsical castle, his home being a miniature fortress, complete with a working drawbridge, a flagstaff from which he hoists a flag, and even a stinger, a miniature cannon that fires precisely at 9 o'clock every night, Greenwich time.
A castle with a cannon.
Yes. It's wonderfully eccentric. Here, away from the grim realities of Jaggers' office, Wemmick transforms into a warm, caring, almost childlike individual, tending devotedly to his aged parent and later marrying the equally quirky Miss Skiffins. These contrasting environments, Jaggers' austere, guarded, and morally ambiguous world versus Wemmick's quirky domestic sanctuary, illustrate the profound, almost necessary coping mechanisms people adopt to navigate the guarded and suspicious social structures of London.
It shows you need a way to cope, right?
Precisely. They show Pip, and us, how even in a seemingly cold, transactional, and often corrupt world, pockets of genuine human connection and eccentric warmth can exist, if only in carefully segregated spheres. Wemmick's approach is a survival strategy, a way to maintain his humanity in a dehumanizing profession.
And then, as if all the layers of London and its inhabitants weren't enough to reorient Pip's understanding, the central mystery of his life is brutally unveiled, shattering his illusions about Miss Havisham's role and, most profoundly, his own destiny. This is the ultimate aha moment of the story, but it's deeply unsettling. Describe how this revelation redefines Pip's sense of self, his understanding of his past, and his entire future, particularly knowing the extreme danger his true benefactor is in.
This is truly the seismic, earth-shattering event of Pip's life, transforming everything he thought he knew and fundamentally reshaping his identity. It happens on a stormy and wet night, a deliberate, pathetic fallacy with the external weather mirroring Pip's internal turmoil. Pip is alone in his temple chambers, a place that now seems less a sanctuary and more a stage for unsettling truths. A voice from the darkness chillingly announces, "The top, Mr. Pip."
Just goosebumps?
Right. The man who enters dripping wet is unmistakably the convict from the marshes, now revealed as Abel Magwitch, though Pip, with a growing sense of obligation and even affection, comes to call him Provis.
Provis.
The truth he delivers is devastating in its simplicity and its profound irony. "Yes, Pip, dear boy, I've made a gentleman on you. It's me what has done it." Magwitch, with the fierce pride that cuts through his rough exterior, explains that he had sworn, "Sure as ever I earned a guinea, that guinea should go for you," ever since he saw Pip, that frightened child, on the misty marshes all those years ago.
All this time, it was him.
All this time, he had been a successful sheep farmer, stock breeder, away in the New World, sending money back to Jaggers, specifically for Pip's education and upkeep, fulfilling his promise, however unorthodox. The crushing blow, the immediate source of profound danger and moral dilemma for Pip, is Magwitch's revelation that he now faces death for returning to England as its death to come back.
So his benefactor is a hunted man.
A hunted man, facing execution if caught. This revelation brutally redefines everything Pip thought he knew about his great expectations. They don't come from the refined, aristocratic, and ultimately sterile world of Miss Havisham, which he so desperately aspired to, but from the very common criminal world he sought to escape, from a man he initially feared and felt shame for. His immediate feelings shift from revulsion and shock to a profound sense of moral obligation and profound pity for the man who sacrificed everything for him. The true gentleman, in this moment, is not the one with wealth or status, but the one with unwavering loyalty and a strange, powerful love.
It turns everything on its head.
Completely. The story then peels back another layer of interconnectedness. Herbert, through a note from Provis's small black book, reveals that young Havisham's name was Arthur. Compeyson is the man who professed to be Miss Havisham's lover. Magwitch then confirms Compeyson was the worst of scoundrels, who got me into such nets as made me his black slave, revealing him as Miss Havisham's original betrayer and the gentleman convict he struggled with on the marshes.
You other convict.
The very same. Magwitch later admits with simmering resentment, "I hunted him down, I smashed his face." The grand illusions Pip held are shattered, replaced by a complex, dangerous reality rooted in the very past he fled. His entire future is now bound to the life and death of a hunted man.
And if that wasn't enough to completely unravel Pip's understanding of his world, the layers of tragic connection continue to unfold, linking Pip's life even more deeply to this hidden, manipulated past. As Pip's own lineage, his true benefactor, becomes clearer, so too does Estella's, revealing a heartbreaking intersection of lives that has been twisted by bitterness and revenge. What does the revelation of Estella's true parentage and Miss Havisham's final desperate moments reveal about the cyclical nature of suffering, the devastating consequences of revenge, and perhaps the possibility of redemption?
The unraveling of Estella's parentage is another layer of shocking truth that meticulously binds these seemingly disparate lives together. Pip learns from Herbert that Molly, Jagger's housekeeper, the one with the remarkably strong wrists that Jagger so proudly displayed, is, in fact, Estella's mother.
Molly, Jagger's housekeeper.
The very same. Wemmick later confirms this, revealing a dark history. Molly was tried for murder, having strangled the object of her jealousy, a woman who was in a relationship with Compayson. She was acquitted due to Jagger's shrewd, manipulative defense, which strategically focused on the improbability of her small-looking arms having such strength, despite the fact that Jaggers himself never dwelt upon the strength of her hands then, when he was showing them off.
Wow, so Jaggers knew all along.
Oh, Jaggers knew everything. This links Molly directly to the sinister figure of Compayson, the very man who betrayed Miss Havisham and enslaved Mary.
It's all connected.
Every thread. Miss Havisham, in a climactic moment of intense regret and despair, finally confronts Pip about Estella. She confesses the full, devastating depth of her revenge, revealing that Jaggers brought her here asleep and I called her Estella, when the child was merely 2 or 3. Miss Havisham explicitly bred her to be loved and most cruelly to break their hearts, mirroring the heartbreak inflicted upon her. In a moment of profound anguish realization, she cries, "What have I done? What have I done?" This anguished cry is the culmination of her long-held revenge, realizing its devastating, self-destructive consequences not just for others but for herself and for Estella.
She finally sees the damage.
She does. This profound moment of confession is followed by a literal and symbolic inferno. Pip visits Miss Havisham, who, consumed by regret, asks him to take the pencil and write under my name, "I forgive her." A desperate attempt at reconciliation and peace. In a tragically symbolic turn, she then catches fire in a shower of sparks, her old decaying bride's dress igniting.
Oh, the fire scene.
Pip heroically sustained serious injuries, saving her. But in her final delirious moments, she repeats, "When she first came, I meant to save her from misery like mine." This tragic irony is profound. In trying to spare Estella her own suffering, Miss Havisham condemned her to emotional barrenness, to an inability to love or to truly feel, making her a victim of the very plot she was meant to execute.
So she created the very thing she hated.
In a way, yes. The cycle of pain, born of betrayal and sustained by revenge, is tragically evident. Yet Miss Havisham's final regret, her plea for forgiveness, and her last desperate act hint at a possibility of redemption, a breaking of that bitter, self-consuming cycle, even in death. It reveals that suffering, when acknowledged, can sometimes lead to a desperate desire for a different legacy. 6. Consequences and acceptance. Pip's journey to humility.
The narrative takes us to Pip's final, desperate efforts to protect his benefactor, Magwitch. These efforts are fraught with tension, danger, and ultimately lead to a dramatic, heartbreaking climax on the river. How does the ultimate failure of this meticulously planned escape, coupled with Magwitch's remarkable acceptance of his fate, highlight a different kind of strength and nobility than Pip initially sought or even understood?
The escape attempt is indeed a desperate, climactic, and profoundly poignant sequence. Pip and Herbert meticulously devise a plan to get Provis out of the country, away from the reach of English law, via a foreign steamer. They prepare Provis, meet him on the cold, dark river, and are rowing away, hoping to disappear into the vastness of the sea to secure a future for Magwitch and, by extension, for Pip himself.
Holding your breath the whole time.
Absolutely. However, their hopes are brutally dashed when another boat appears, seemingly out of the mist, and to Pip's utter horror, his convict recognizes the figure in the other boat. Compayson, his nemesis.
Yo, Compayson again.
Again. A violent struggle ensues between the two convicts, a final, visceral culmination of their long, bitter rivalry. Magwitch is found swimming, but not swimming freely, injured from the fight, and is tragically taken on board, instantly manacled at the wrists and ankles, the very symbols of his lifelong captivity.
Just heartbreaking failure.
It is. Despite his capture, his re-imprisonment, and the almost certain prospect of facing death by hanging, Magwitch faces his fate with a remarkable, quiet dignity and an almost serene acceptance that contrasts sharply with his earlier ferocity and desperation. He says to Pip, "I'm quite content to take my chance. I've seen my boy, and he can be a gentleman without me."
Wow, that line.
It's utterly profound. Pip feels his hand tremble, and he hears that old sound in his throat, softened now, signifying a deep internal transformation in Magwitch. This poignant acceptance, rooted in his fierce pride for Pip's future, reveals a nobility far beyond mere social status or inherited wealth. It transcends the superficial markers of gentlemanly conduct that Pip had so long pursued. Instead, it demonstrates that true gentlemanly conduct, true worth, is not about money or outward appearances, but about fierce loyalty, unwavering integrity, unconditional love, and a profound sense of self-sacrifice qualities Magwitch displays in his final moments, even as a condemned man.
It's a powerful redefinition of what greatness truly means, isn't it?
Absolutely.
After all the emotional and physical turmoil, the shattering revelations, and the tragic failures, Pip hits rock bottom. He becomes gravely ill, weakened, and despairing, and in his most vulnerable state, the unshakable kindness of Joe becomes his salvation, bringing him full circle in the most profound way. How does Joe's selfless love and simple goodness expose the hollowness of Pip's earlier ambitions and ultimately lead to a profound transformation in Pip's character, a true reevaluation of his values?
This sequence is deeply moving and marks Pip's ultimate reckoning, his true spiritual and emotional climax. Magwitch, gravely ill in prison, eventually dies, but not alone. Pip visits him daily, providing comfort, companionship, and an unwavering presence, offering a dignity in death that Magwitch was denied in life.
He stays with him till the end.
He does. Shortly after Magwitch's death, Pip himself falls very ill, suffering from a debilitating fever, and confessing that he lost my reason for a time, feeling utterly miserable, dejected, and distressed. It is at this absolute lowest point, stripped of his illusions, his health, and his fortune, that Joe Gargery, Pip's steadfast and loving brother-in-law, comes to London.
Joe comes to him.
Joe comes. Embodying pure, unconditional love, he nurses Pip with boundless devotion, staying faithfully by his side, completely oblivious to Pip's past snobbery or his many acts of ingratitude. Pip admits, in a moment of raw, searing honesty, "I would not have gone back to Joe now for any consideration. Simply, my sense of my own worthless conduct to them was greater than every consideration."
He finally understands his own behavior.
He truly does. This profound realization exposes the utter hollowness of his earlier ambitions and the superficiality of the social world he had so desperately chased. Joe not only cares for him physically, but also quietly pays off Pip's substantial debts, an act of selfless generosity that further highlights Pip's earlier ingratitude and pride.
Joe just takes care of everything.
He does. Once Pip begins to recover, Joe, in his unassuming way, quietly leaves London, wanting to not intrude. He leaves behind a touching letter. "Not wishful to intrude, I have departured for your well any dear." This gentle, humble departure, combined with the news that Mrs. Joe ain't living, having died about a week after Pip got ill and Miss Havisham left a cool $4,000 to Mr. Matthew Pocket, solidifies the passing of the old order and the profound sacrifices made by those who truly loved him. Joe's unwavering love and simple, unassuming goodness become the true measure of worth, a beacon of authentic human connection that guides Pip toward a genuine humility and a profound reevaluation of what truly constitutes great expectations.
His ambition, once a driving force, is now seen for the destructive path it became, leading him back to the very place he scorned, but with entirely new eyes. And so, Pip's arduous quest for great expectations ultimately leads him back to the very humility he once scorned, the very origins he so desperately tried to leave behind. The journey ends not with grandiosity or triumph in the traditional sense, but with quiet reconciliation, bringing Pip back to his roots, but with a profoundly changed understanding of himself and the world. What is the lasting message of this extraordinary narrative about the nature of true worth and the enduring, transformative power of human connection, even after profound mistakes and the most self-serving ambitions?
Pip's return home, to the marshes and the forge, is a powerful, symbolic full circle, a pilgrimage of humility and self-discovery. He feels a sense of increasing relief as I drew nearer to them, and a sense of leaving arrogance and untruthfulness further and further behind.
He's shedding that old skin.
He is. The external world mirrors his internal peace. The June weather is delicious, the larks soaring high over the green corn, and the countryside more beautiful and peaceful by far than I had ever known it to be yet. He finds Joe and Biddy, now married in this serene setting, a picture of quiet contentment and authentic love. The simple, profound act of forgiveness from them is the emotional core of his redemption, the final balm for his wounded conscience. Pip asks humbly, "Pray tell me both that you forgive me." And Joe, with his boundless forgiving heart, replies, "Oh, dear old Pip, old chap, God knows as I forgive you if I have anything to forgive."
Oh, gee.
And Biddy echoes his sentiment with equal grace, "Amen, and God knows I do." This unconditional acceptance, this boundless grace, is the antidote to all of Pip's earlier self-delusion, his snobbery, and his relentless social climbing. It's the moment where his true worth is finally recognized, not for what he achieved in London, but for the man he has become, stripped of his false expectations. The novel then offers a nuanced and famously debated conclusion, with Pip seeing Estella again at the ruined Sacha's house, still a solitary figure. She falters, as if in her own unrecognizing way, she had some memory of having seen me long ago, implying a faint echo of connection, a shared tragic past, but also the permanent scars of their upbringing and Miss Havisham's cruel tutelage.
It's not a perfect fairy tale ending.
No, definitely not. The lasting message of Great Expectations is unmistakably clear. True happiness and fulfillment come not from external achievements, social status, or inherited wealth, the kind of great expectations Pip initially chased, but from authentic relationships, from humility, from integrity, and, perhaps most importantly, from profound self-knowledge and acceptance. Pip's journey teaches us that the greatest expectations we can have are not for what the world can give us, but for the kind of person we choose to be, and the enduring connections we forge along the way. His great expectations were never truly about money or a fancy life, but about becoming a truly good and compassionate human being, something he ultimately finds by returning to the very values he once abandoned, but now understands in their truest, most profound sense.
What an extraordinary journey we've taken through Pip's world. From the chilling, mist-shrouded marshes to the grand, yet often hollow, illusions of London, and finally to the quiet, hard-won wisdom found in the most unexpected and humble of places. It truly is a testament to how our earliest encounters, even the most terrifying or seemingly insignificant, can shape our path in ways we never foresee, often leading us far from our initial aspirations.
And it raises an important question for all of us, something to ponder as we reflect on Pip's transformation. What great expectations do we hold for our own lives, and from what truly unexpected, perhaps even uncanny, sources might our deepest fulfillments and truest worth ultimately stem?
Something to think about long after our time together today. Thank you for joining us on this deep exploration of great expectations.
Until next time, keep digging deeper into the stories that shape us all and revealing the profound truths within them.
This has been the Uncanny Valley Podcast.